Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to thegrowingtruth.com.net. Oh, God, let me start this over. Hey, welcome, everybody, today to Survive in Advance this morning. If you're listening to this right now, you're not hearing our good friend Mike Goodpasture, who is on his way to Dolly World, of all places, to take his kids for a vacation and some football games. But we're going to go ahead and move on without him. So I'm going to try and do the introduction, which I'm not going to be as good as him at all. I'm Steve Risley, one of the hosts of Survive in Advance. We're going to talk today to Brian Eauf from BustyBrackets.com, Fansided website. And we're going to talk a little college basketball today as we get into the college season now. We get into league play, tournament play. We start heading to the big dance in March. So, Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
We're doing great. Let me start off how I usually do. 75 and sunny out here in L.A.
Yeah, it's about 50 and rainy here in North Carolina, so you got me beat again.
You guys are getting some pretty crappy weather out there. I'm just glad it's not NASCAR season because we'd be missing a lot of races.
It's this time of year. It's always pretty crappy. It was nice over the weekend, but it's been pretty crappy.
Okay, well, here we go. The holiday break is coming to an end. Big Ten play starts tonight. The Big Ten play has kind of started already. All the conferences are starting, ACC, everybody. What are we looking for in conference play? What can we expect? Let's break it down by ACC. What are we expecting in the ACC first this year?
I'm interested to see kind of how all those top teams shake themselves out. I think there's we've talked before, there's about 9 teams in the ACC that are pretty much you would consider locks for the NCAA tournament at this point. I'm throwing Syracuse in that mix, but they're, you could consider them a bowl team if you wanted to. But there are 9 teams in the ACC that are legitimate NCAA tournament teams and should have those expectations even at this point in the season. Now, in that, there's a couple tiers. You have the top tier of teams, which I would consider to be Virginia, Duke. You can even throw Florida State, Virginia Tech, and UNC in that mix. They're kind of all competing for a conference championship and then a first-round bye in the conference tournament, finishing the top 4 of the conference. And then you have a tier below that with teams like NC State, Clemson, Louisville, and Syracuse kind of fighting out. I'm interested to see kind of who emerges from those tiers and if a team from that second tier can jump up into that first tier and become a real power in the conference this year.
Looking at the AP top 25 and everything, is this pretty much Duke's to lose?
Yeah, Duke has such a, I think, built up such a rapport or enough goodwill with voters because of their talent level and what we've seen from them, the way they've won these games, that if they lose, people will assume that it's just a blip on the radar and not drop them all too far. They're a team that certainly has more talent than everybody else, and in a year where there's a lot of good teams, but all those good teams have at least one pretty big flaw, Duke's going to get a lot of leeway when it comes to that sort of thing.
Hey, Virginia, they're undefeated still. They were ranked number 1 in most all last year. They're number 4 right now. Are they a threat, or are they kind of like they're going to finish second in the ACC?
They're definitely a threat. I think though I picked them to win the ACC over Duke, just because.
Really?
Yeah, Duke's hasn't played a true road game yet, and with those young guys, that's going to be something that I'm sure inevitably trips them up. We've seen against some of the lesser teams they've played, and something that hurt them against Texas Tech when they played a good team was their struggle shooting the 3 and executing in the half court, which when you play Virginia, they're going to make you do what you do worse. They're going to, make you play to they're going to play to your weaknesses and make you play in the half court, which I don't think Duke can do. And as we saw last year, Virginia's just a much more consistent team. You can make all the jokes about UMBC and then not making any runs in the tournament.
That was a fluke that was going to happen eventually at some point in time. Unfortunately, Virginia caught the bad end of that deal. That could have been anybody. That's not an indictment against Virginia at all.
Yeah, and I mean, for the most part, a lot of the criticism about them in the NCAA tournament, and if you can win playing that style, is warranted because we haven't seen them really meet expectations in the tournament yet under Tony Bennett. But when it comes to the regular season, there's nobody who dominates like these guys have really over the past half decade. And with them having everybody back, most of their significant pieces back from last year, plus DeAndre Hunter taking that next step forward and giving them the kind of wing player they haven't really had since Justin Anderson. And I think Hunter's probably a better college player than Justin Anderson just because he's healthy. They're going to be a team. I don't know if they're going to go 17-1 in ACC play like they did last year, but I don't see them losing more than 2 or 3 games.
Right. So let me ask you this question. What's the deal with North Carolina? I mean, they almost seem like I don't want to say a second-tier team because it's North Carolina, but, they're ranked 15th in the polls pretty much across the board. They're 9-3. Are we seeing the start of maybe the decline of the Roy Williams era, or are they just struggling recruiting because Virginia and Duke and other schools out there are starting to get players that usually North Carolina got?
I think it's more of a factor of the personnel they have on the roster this year. They have a lot of talent, and I think they can win any way they want to play. But I think this year specifically, their struggles or inability to have played up to the full potential yet falls on Roy Williams. He likes to play traditional 2 bigs, get up and down the court, but rebound, kind of beat you inside with big men. And traditionally, UNC has not had great outside shooting teams. This year's roster, just the way things fell from them in terms of having young, big guys honestly producing, Nasir Little not playing up to the caliber that we thought he was going to be when he was coming out of high school. They have a roster that's best suited to play small and shoot a lot of threes, which is not a system that Roy Williams has ever really used and is comfortable using, and we've seen him reluctant to make changes to go to that system this year. I think that's something they need to do and would eventually get them to a point where they're playing at the level that they can play at. But Roy hasn't really made any changes this year or shown any willingness to adapt to that, and I think that's their biggest problem right now.
Okay, so is he kind of like almost in the later stages of like what I say the Bob Knight thing, where you kind of have pretty well been there, done it all, and you start to think, I'm just kind of enjoying the ride now, or can we see a resurgence from North Carolina back up to the with Duke and Virginia and up in the top 3 or 4 where they normally are?
Yeah, no, I think we can see a resurgence. This is a team that is going to have a different identity than we've normally seen from North Carolina teams. And, Roy's definitely on the back end of his career, even though he just signed that lengthy extension. I don't think he's going to finish out. But this doesn't seem to be, at least to me, a case of Roy mailing it in. This is more of him having the personnel that suits a system other than what he normally plays, and more of a unwillingness to adjust that system to his personnel.
Yeah, and Steve Alford is not going to finish out his extension either, but we'll get to that later on in the show. So we know about extensions.
Yes.
Unless you're Kirk Cousins, you get $85 million guaranteed. Your extension is only as good as what you've done the season you've done. All right, how about the Big Ten? Let's go to the Big Ten. That's probably the next power conference out there. A lot of teams that are supposed to be coming out of the Big Ten. Is the Big Ten, are they good, or are they just all equal and we think they're good? What's the deal with the Big Ten?
The Big Ten is good. There's a clear top 2, I would say, Michigan State, who are one of those 2 is going to win the conference championship, and I don't think anybody else is really going to challenge those 2. But after them, you have 6, 7, 8 really good teams who are all going to be ranked, 25 through 15 to just out of the rankings every week, and kind of go back and forth based on how they're playing. But you have a bunch of teams that may not be elite but are really, really good. And that's going to make for a lot of really good, interesting, meaningful games in January and February as all of those teams try to propel themselves into that tier and potentially be that big challenger to Michigan or Michigan State.
Is Michigan really the number 2 team in the country? Are they that good? I've seen them play a couple times. I'm not that. I think there's a gap between them and Duke, and I think Virginia and Tennessee are probably stronger than Michigan. That's my opinion.
I've had Michigan ranked number 2 for a while now just because of the strength of their resume. I don't think they're as good as they're not playing as well right now as they showed against Villanova, against UNC when they were blowing those teams out. And now given we've seen that Villanova and UNC aren't playing to the level we thought they were going to play at. But Michigan is a really good team. They play really good defense. They're up there as a top 5 defense in the country right now. Their offense is sluggish at times, but they have the personnel to be able to overcome that and score a bunch of when they get a chance to. Early on in the year when Michigan State was struggling, it really looked like the Wolverines were playing like the best team. Michigan State has seemed to turn that corner. Cassius Winston's playing really well. They ran through Northwestern last night. I think they've kind of are now starting to find their groove and playing up their potential that way. But until I see Michigan really lose or struggle with anybody who's not a good team or struggle at home against anybody, because they didn't look great in their I think they beat Northwestern by 2 or 4 points earlier this year, which I think was kind of the point where things started turning for them. But they're still winning games, taking care of business. So I would hold out any negative thoughts on them until we see them actually lose a game and potentially start struggling.
Okay. And Michigan State, of course, with Tom Izzo, they get more dangerous every game they play because we know he builds his teams to play in the tournaments. And, we're getting in there, and his team is one of the few teams in the country that perennially just starts about this time of year, starts improving dramatically. And you think they're out of it this year, and here you go, and they're in the Final Four again. And
their experience, and they may not have the just pure raw talent of some of, let's say, the top 5 teams, but they have the experience to overcome that as long as they take care of the ball.
Yeah. And then Indiana's got to go to Michigan, I think, this weekend. I think they play up there. Can they win that game?
Mm-hmm. They can win that game. I think that'll be very telling for both sides because Indiana has struggled on the road the past couple years. They've done a little bit better this year, but that's still a little bit of their bugaboo. And Michigan, as we just talked about, their play has dipped a little bit to the point where if Indiana plays well, they may be able to catch them. And I think this will be a good measuring stick game for both teams in that regard.
Yeah, well, I'll sidebar here right now for just a second and go into with the preseason non-conference games. Mm-hmm. What's your take on scheduling these? Because, I thought Indiana had a pretty weak, and obviously I'm an Indiana grad. I played there, and so I follow them closer than anybody probably. But it seems like many of these big college teams now have pretty weak preseason schedules where they'll play the big CBS made-for-TV games that they want to play, like Duke, Indiana, or ESPN, somebody. But then they're pretty well beaten up on a little team. Everybody except UCLA, who lost, I think, Liberty and
Liberty and Belmont.
Yeah. Belmont, yeah. So they lost to both of them. So everybody else was beating up on them on fees. But is that a good thing? And I know that I think Indiana's only had maybe a couple of road games, really true road games. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, that's not a uncommon.
I'm talking general, not just Indiana. So just talking general.
Right, yeah. That's not I think for fans, obviously, we want the best teams to play the best teams all the time. And we get that in conference play. We get good matchups every night. And so when you don't get that in conference play, it can kind of draw your attention away from that, wanting you or cause you to want those games, wondering why they aren't playing those games. From a team perspective, I think it's probably best to have a mix. You need to play some lesser opponents as more, especially with you incorporating younger players in every year. And as we've seen, one-and-done players have more of an impact on teams as players are leaving. You kind of want players to have some time to get comfortable filling in the new roles in a game situation, playing against someone other than themselves. So there is some benefit to playing some of those cupcake teams, although you certainly can't go overboard with it. I don't see anything wrong with playing neutral site games, so some of those made-for-TV games, because when you get to the NCAA tournament, you're playing a neutral site. So essentially what you're doing is playing a good team and preparing you for an NCAA tournament atmosphere Again, from a fan perspective, home and homes and playing in a true college basketball atmosphere is much more fun, much more exciting. But from a team perspective, if I get a chance to test my team and get them used to an NCAA tournament atmosphere, I'm going to take advantage of that. At the same time, I think I still want to play maybe one or two true road games in the non-conference just to get your team's feet wet in that a little bit for conference play, so they don't completely fall apart in conference play when they play on the road. So I think having a good mix of all three is probably best case scenario. But for fans, obviously, we want best of the best, high-profile matchups all the time.
Yeah, and we get a few of those. Like I said, CBS and Fox and ESPN create those games, and they set enough of those up. But it just seems to me like Indiana's. I'm just going to go back to Indiana only as an example. Not that I'm just trying to. I don't want to talk about Indiana all day long. Other than that's their two losses were at Duke and at Arkansas, two road games, and they're a young team. I mean, and it just seems to me you want to get these young kids more battle tested to play on the road, because now Duke, North Carolina, Kentucky, Indiana, Kansas, they're Big Ten's a 20-game schedule now, half at home and half away, and there's a lot of teams that haven't played a lot of away games yet. Don't understand about sleeping in a hotel, eating food in a hotel, getting on an airplane, in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where it's 12 below zero. Does that work against you? Or just has the factor of getting into the tournament just become so important you've just got to rack up wins? Then I'm going to ask you about KenPom and the quadrants. So address the first one first. Is it more important just to get wins? Is that the most important thing to do?
Wins are always the most important thing, but to a certain extent. Like you'd rather have an opportunity to get a bigger win than to play, directional school state at home for the 10th game in a row. Indiana playing specifically Indiana playing two road games against competition like Duke and Arkansas, with the fact that the Big Ten is at a 20-game schedule, is a lot more true road games against better competition than we usually see teams of that stature play. So I actually would give Archie Miller credit for getting those people on the schedule and going out, and I think that may pay dividends for them in Big Ten play when they're having to go on the road. There's a fine line there in terms of scheduling for sure wins in terms of or over road tests against good teams, because obviously wins over good teams on the road carry such huge weight with the tournament committee that you kind of want to put yourself out there with a chance to get some of those wins. But at the same time, there's no upside and very, very bad downside to scheduling those kind of cupcake teams.
Right. And of course, we was going to say, too, when teams play, the lesser teams, that's usually the biggest payday of the year for the school that's coming in, because they get part of the gate. They get a game on TV, which, a lot of times the smaller schools don't play on TV a lot. So they get a game on the Big Ten Network or on the SEC Network or on the Pac-12 Network or the Big East Network or the ACC. They get a televised game, and they usually get a cut of the gate, which if you go to, again, I said go back to Assembly Hall in Bloomington, 18,000 people, they get a cut of that gate. So it's usually that's why those teams come and sacrifice themselves, basically playing those games, correct?
Yeah, it's a necessary evil for those schools. Yeah,
I know. We had the Hoosier Classic every year with 3, I'll say, putz teams, and we always won by 50 each game. But those teams got in, they got a nice party gift, and they got a big payday, and they got to come up to Bloomington and play at Assembly Hall on television, which was a big deal. Okay, do you know anything about KenPom? What is this thing matter, or is this just another Saragon rating, RPI? Is this another ranking system that? Because now I know the big hype now is points per possession. That's kind of what KenPom's all about, isn't it?
Well, it's another ranking system, but it's a ranking system based on analytics that's supposed to measure, kind of balance more for the teams you play like in terms of the quality of the teams you play, where you play them, and how you do based on that competition you play and where you play them. So it's supposed to include all of the sort of extra factors that go into a college basketball game that simple analytics don't necessarily quantify. It's more adjusted analytics for all of those extra factors. And it's proven to be really, really helpful and accurate over the past, since they've been doing it since the early 2000s, which is why it's now something that the selection committee looks at, and it's one of the more useful tools in terms of gauging teams and what they're good at and what they're not good at.
Yeah, so it's kind of like paralysis by analysis, huh?
If you go overboard with it, for sure, as is the case with everything. But it is a really good tool.
Can they ever come up with a way to measure heart, which is why I think teams win championships is with heart?
You never measure heart.
You never measure heart. You never measure luck. You never measure heart, right? Okay.
Yeah, and just like everything else, when you're evaluating teams, you can take a little bit of analytics, but you can't go just straight analytics. You have to factor in some of the intangible factors as well.
Okay, so can you, for everybody else out there listening, can you briefly describe the quadrant system? I just learned about it, but I'm going to let you. I imagine you know it better than I do because you're in bracketology. That's the most important factor right now, isn't it? The quadrant system.
Yes and no. What the committee wants to do is take a whole bunch of different factors and measure them together in order to try and find some sort of unbiased way of evaluating teams. So they'll take metrics from all sorts of different systems and try and put them together on that resume in hopes that there may be one glaring either strength or weakness in a team that they can point to when they're debating seed lines and who gets in and who gets out. So it's just kind of one of those factors. I know the NCAA has tried to create some metrics that incorporate all of the metrics, but that has not worked as well for them this year. So it'll certainly be interesting when the committee does their initial top 16 rankings coming up here in the next couple of weeks to see how they're evaluating these teams.
Yeah, and I go back, and again, for everybody out there listening, I keep apologizing and go back to Indiana because it's just, like you said, it's a team I follow more closely than anybody. But I've read where they have like 5 quadrant 1 wins, which is like one of the only 2 or 3 teams in the country have that. Mm-hmm. But then, so is that significant right now?
That is significant right now. We saw Oklahoma pick up a large number of quadrant 1 wins in the non-conference last year, and then, of course, we all know what happened to them when they got in Big 12 play. They really struggled, but still made the tournament because of the amount of quadrant 1 wins, which are wins the committee deems to be the best of the best, whether it's you're playing a really good team at home or a solid team on the road, kind of adjust for some of that. Because they had gotten a lot of those wins in non-conference to where when they got to the bubble conversation, they had better wins over a lot of the other teams. And so a lot of people thought Oklahoma wasn't playing like a tournament team, but they have the resume of a team that was a lot for the tournament.
Yeah, and so now my understanding is with this, because I mean, people aren't getting this right now. I'm just learning it. Indiana say they have 5 quadrant 1 wins right now, but teams can fall out of quadrant 1, right? So those there may not be 5 at the end of the year. They may have 5 now, but if teams fall apart, like let's say maybe Arkansas was a quadrant 1. Well, it's a bad choice. Louisville was a quadrant 1 win. Let's just use that one. Or Butler was a quadrant 1 for Indiana. Those teams could drop out of quadrant 1. They drop to a quadrant 2 or quadrant 3, and that diminishes even what Indiana accomplished early in the year. It lowers their ability to get a good seed in the tournament. Correct?
Correct. So quadrant 1.
It's a sliding scale.
It's a sliding scale. Quadrant 1, I believe, quadrant 1 win counts for. I don't know what metric they're using this year. I know last year they used RPI for this. But if you beat a team ranked in the top 25 of the RPI at home, that counted for a quadrant 1 win. If you beat a team in the RPI top 50 on a neutral court, that counted as a quadrant 1 win. If you counted on, if you beat a team on the road, they ranked in the top 75, I believe, it's either 75 or 80 on the road, that counted as a quadrant 1 win. And so obviously teams' RPI would change every day, every week. And so if you beat a team that's kind of on that border, a quadrant 1 win then may not be a quadrant 1 win later, which is why for a lot of these teams, especially in non-conference, if you have a win over a team like Indiana does over Butler, you start rooting for Butler the rest of the season because if they play well, that boosts their metrics and then keeps them as a quadrant 1 win, whereas if they start losing, like Butler's been doing lately, it drops them down and that win doesn't look as impressive for the Hoosiers.
Right. Yeah. And so, okay. So in the end, and we'll get off this subject now because, I think we can go on for hours talking about this, but it is the way they're going to place and seed teams. The most important thing still to do is to bust through your conference, win as many games as you can, post a good number on won loss, and if you can, win your damn conference tournament. That's still the most important thing to do, correct?
Yeah. The best way to get in is to win games.
Win games. So still nothing changes. It's just another thing that we hire a bunch of other people, analytical people, to come out with the side rules and say, this is what it will look like on paper, but it generally doesn't look like that on the court. I mean, in 81, I don't know if we were ever in the top 10 until the end of the season, and we won the tournament. And we just peaked at the right time. Teams are going to peak. Teams are going to play well at the end of the season. You don't know what's going to happen with any of that. Okay, let's move back into the conferences a little bit. What's going on in the Big East? I love the Big East. I think it's the most physical, gutty, gritty basketball. I love watching Big East basketball. I think those guys, I love the gyms they play in. They're kind of smaller gyms. They're East Coast. They're boisterous. But are they still considered a power conference?
Yeah, they're still considered a power conference. They'll still send 5 or 6 teams to the tournament this year. The difference will be that there's no really top-tier teams in the conference. Like all of those 5 or 6 teams they would send to the tournament would be 7, 8, 9, 10 seeds for the most part. And that's going to make for a really fun conference race, as we've seen, because there's everybody can beat everybody. Seton Hall right now, I think, is the only team in the Big East that's 2-0. And teams like Villanova will be better. St. John's looks like a team that's probably going to be pretty good. I know they're 13-1, but haven't really played anybody, but they're played well enough, I think, to prove that there's some validity behind that record. Marquette's a really good team. And, again, all these teams are going to end up beating up on each other. So there are really good teams in that conference, but there's not the Villanovas from years past or the Xavier from last year who are going to be contending for
Butler,
1, 2, 3 seeds.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Butler's kind of, I don't want to say middle of the road because they're still a great basketball program, but they're not where they were 2 or 3 or 4 years ago.
No.
So, okay. All right. So who wins the Big East? Who's the team to beat in the Big East? Villanova? I mean, is Jay Wright still the guy to beat?
I don't think so. Not this year. I think
Marquette took on the chance recently, didn't they? Did they think they have a big loss?
They lost at St. John's, which was they lost I think that game by 20. Marcus Howard did not play well, and he traditionally the past year and a half really has not played well against St. John's. Villanova, it got reiterated again last night when they really, really struggled to beat DePaul. That Villanova is not that good. I think Villanova is going to finish about 500 in the Big East. They just don't shoot the ball well enough. They're not athletic enough, not deep enough. They're talented enough that they'll get in the tournament and not really have a problem with that, but they're not going to be a real factor at the top of the Big East. I still like Marquette to win. I think they have the most talent, the best player, Marcus Howard. St. John's, I do think will be a factor if they keep playing the way they have been, because Shamori Pons is up there with some of the better players in the conference as well, and they have maybe the best backcourt in the conference. Seton Hall is playing really well right now, but I don't know if they'll be able to keep up this level of play. It could really come down to a race between Marquette and St. John's, which would have seemed very strange 2 or 3 years ago, but that's kind of where we are this year.
Yeah. Yeah, it just seems that there's more parity this year. Duke looks on paper like, but it's on paper. They're young kids, and you don't know what's going to happen in tournament play with a group like that. But it seems like everybody else. All right, let's go on to the SEC. Now, this is generally a football conference. They're putting some basketball teams on the map all of a sudden. What's going on in the SEC? Tennessee. I watched them play. They look brutal. They're tough.
Yeah, the SEC has invested in some really good basketball coaches. We've seen a lot of really good hires by teams in that conference over the past decade.
Don't say Tom Crean.
Well, for Georgia, Tom Crean's one of the better coaches.
No, I like Tom Crean. Tom Crean did a lot of good for Indiana. He's a great basketball coach. He did a lot of good for Indiana. I'm being facetious. So
yeah, specifically for him, when's the last time Georgia had a basketball program that was with parent belts?
Yeah.
You're right. And that's Mississippi State hired Ben Howland, who kind of got run out of UCLA, although I'm sure they want him back now. But now Mississippi State's relevant again, and are one of the top 20 teams in the country, and are playing well. People care about them for the first time in a while. Alabama basketball as well with Avery Johnson. Auburn with Bruce Pearl. They've gone out and gotten these coaches, and even Tennessee with Rick Barnes have gone out and gotten these coaches that have really elevated the programs and made the conference a really good basketball conference. Tennessee, one of the best teams in the country, as you mentioned. Kentucky, still one of the most talented teams, and I think we may be starting to see them put it together with their young group. Auburn's going to be right there. LSU is really talented. Mississippi State, talked about, is really talented. They're not. I don't think they're as deep as they were last year when they got 8 teams in the tournament. But the 6 or 7 teams that they're going to get in are all going to be really good and could threaten to make a second weekend type run.
Yeah. So Calipari, is he a great recruiter or a great coach?
He is a better recruiter than he is a coach, but that's not to diminish who he is as a coach. No. That's more of just how good he is as a recruiter. I think because he's one of the best recruiters we've ever seen, people will automatically go to, well, he's not as good as a coach. And, you can be a really, really good coach, but if you're one of the best ever at recruiting, people may not give your coaching enough credit. And I think that's kind of what the case with Calipari is. He is one of the better, I would say probably top 5, top 10 X&O coaches in the country. He just doesn't necessarily get credit for it because he has all this talent and he's supposed to do that because of how good he is as a recruiter.
So is the SEC, are they ready to make a run of the national championship team yet? Are they there yet, or are they getting to there? Can Tennessee, because we know the Big Ten, the ACC, you get the conferences every year. In the end, the Big East, there's 3 or 4 conferences that always seem to deliver, on payday. Is the SEC there yet or not? Or are they getting there?
I could see Tennessee or Kentucky making a Final Four run. Auburn is really good, but I don't know if they have the just overall personnel to make that kind of run. Even if they do make the Sweet 16 and Elite 8, there are a number of teams like that who are really good and will win games in the NCAA tournament, but probably not make that long run. Tennessee and Kentucky are the 2 teams that have that Final Four potential. I don't know if either of them have national championship potential. I think both still have some holes that need to be addressing before I'm willing to go that far. But those would be the 2 teams from there that I would say have a really good chance to make the Final Four.
Okay, so realistically, they're getting there. They're
they're working their way up.
Working their way up, and they're going to do probably shortly in basketball what they're doing in football, which is dominate the landscape, or at least be a viable player in the landscape.
I don't know if they'll ever get in basketball to where they are in football.
No. They still dominate football, of course.
Right.
You basically could have a Final Four of college football of all 4 SEC teams. And you probably have 4 best teams playing. Yeah.
Don't forget, South Carolina, my alma mater, made the Final Four 2 years ago, and they've kind of fallen off the map since. But the SEC has been sending some untraditional teams there the past couple of years.
Yeah. What is going on with the Pac-12? I mean, what? I mean, they have one decent
They're terrible.
team. What is going on out there, though? Out here, I'm in LA. I mean, I'm out here.
Yeah.
What is happening out here? I mean, is all the talent going east? Are they going to different schools, or is there no talent on the West Coast? I don't get it.
I mean, there's talent there, and you know they've been getting top recruits and good recruiting classes. It's been really, really weird to see because there's also a bunch of really respected coaches in that conference who simply aren't performing or producing this year. And a lot of other conferences will have, and a lot of other years, will have teams that are supposed to be really good underperform and suffer some bad losses and have a disappointing year, but it's really rare to see an entire conference really go through what the Pac-12 is doing right now, where all of their good teams, or who we thought were going to be good teams, have lost to really, really poor mid-majors like UCLA, like we talked about with Belmont and Liberty, Oregon to Texas Southern, Arizona State to Princeton. It's really rare to see all of this happen at one time. The talent is there. I have a tough time putting my finger on it. I think maybe a lot of the players that they've gotten maybe are not as good as they thought they were, and maybe the coaches aren't as good at player development as maybe coaches are in other leagues. And I think that maybe the problem is that we haven't seen players really progress in that conference like we have in others. Because when was the last time really anybody from the Pac-12 was a legitimate Player of the Year contender outside of somebody from Arizona? And it's been a while.
Yeah.
It's been a while. So I would think that's probably their biggest issue right now, which comes more with coaching and continuing to recruit at a high level.
How many Pac-12 teams can we realistically expect to make the playoff, make the dance? I mean, 1, 2, 3?
I think they got 3 in last year, and I would be surprised if they got 3 in this year. Wow. I started talking about this, and there's been more talk about it since about the Pac-12 potentially being a one-bid league, just because all of these teams have really performed really poorly in the non-conference, and there's no opportunities for real resume-boosting wins in conference play now because everybody struggled so much, which is going to hurt them come tournament time. I have a hard time believing, though, that the committee is going to keep a conference like the Pac-12 at one bid unless everybody continues to struggle like this and Arizona State's the only team that really produces anything of worth. I think they'll get 2 in, whether that be Arizona State and somebody else winning the NCAA tournament, or a team like Washington or Oregon, only losing 3-4 games in conference play. I think that would be enough to get one of those 2 teams in as well. But I don't see them really getting any more than 2 wins. So it would be Arizona State and then somebody else.
Yeah, okay. Well, since we're in the Pac-12, let's talk about Alford.
Let's do it.
While we're out here, what's your take? I mean, was it a good move for UCLA to just dump him at this point in the season? Or, Murray Bartow, what do we know about Murray Bartow? Go ahead, explain your thoughts on it.
We know Bartow is going to be babysitting for the rest of the year, and that's about it. He's not going to be a serious candidate for the full-time job. I know UCLA was trying to hold on to Alford through the end of the year. His buyout dropped from $3.6 million to $1 million, I believe, on May 1st. And so they were hoping to kind of hold on throughout the year, kind of get to that point, save themselves some money, and fire him then. I think the losses to Belmont, the blowout loss to Cincinnati, which was ugly.
I watched the game. I watched it.
Yeah. And then an even uglier loss to Liberty kind of sent a message to the fan base and to the administration that a change really needed to be made, and the players weren't playing hard. They simply were playing with a aloofness or a not caring that we don't really see from college basketball teams in general, let alone one at a program like UCLA. And so that really signaled that this was a situation that was too far gone and something needed to be done sooner than later. And so I think UCLA felt like they had to make the move now in order to save any semblance of a season for them in a year when the Pac-12 isn't very good. Because even though Murray Bartow's not going to be somebody who's there for a long period of time, if Steve Alford was there, UCLA was going to keep going in this downward spiral and, potentially finish one of the worst teams in the conference. And if they kept Alford, it wasn't getting better. And so they decided they needed to do this now, get a jump on their head coaching search, make a change, and hope that it at least keeps them respectable in conference play. And they saw firing Alford as the only way to do that.
Is there any? Was this a money deal where the alumni just said, we're pissed off, we lost 4 games in a row? And because UCLA kind of has a little bit of a history of that with, the Wooden era and things, of how, the stories have been told about how the alumni had brought players in and things like that. Was this another case of the alumni just stepping up and coming in and saying, make the move now, but it's not really a smart move? I don't see any advantage to getting rid of Steve Alford right now. I don't think they didn't gain anything by doing this.
They didn't gain anything, but they had a lot to lose by keeping him.
In the long term,
I would say. Yeah. Not even long term, because they were going to fire him after this year. I think
right.
that had been pretty clear. But the way the season was going and the way the team wasn't showing any fight and the way he had completely lost them, things weren't getting better. Even if he stayed around, there was nothing that would show any sign of hope of them turning it around.
Yeah.
The administration may have wanted to hang on to him. I think the alumni probably got things going in this direction, but it wasn't something that was done completely insanely. Like there was reason behind why alumni felt the way they did.
Yeah. And I live out here, and Steve is a teammate of mine. Mm-hmm. I didn't play with Steve, but we're all Hoosier basketball players, so we all consider ourselves teammates and being part of the program. I've been to a bunch of practices. I had been to some games, and it just UCLA. It's weird out here because it's played more like a pro game than a college game. The Pac-12 plays more of a pro mentality. I mean, you think you're at an NBA game rather than a college game when you're in Pauley Pavilion. And I was talking to another guest we had on, Brian Hammonds with the Golf Channel, and he and I came out and we went to a game when he was covering the LA golf tournament, and it's like USC was playing and it wasn't sold out. I mean, Pauley Pavilion holds maybe 15,000. I don't know if it's that big. Right around there. I mean, it's not as big as, Rupp Arena or Selby Hall or any of the bigger stadiums that are, in the Midwest. And it wasn't sold out. We were like, are you kidding me? This is not sold out. Mm-hmm. And, we thought that the Lakers cheerleaders were there rather than college cheerleaders cheering the game on. It had more of a pro mentality. It's a different thing out here. In California, how they view their basketball and things like that. So interesting. So what does Steve do? Where do you have any? I mean, does he coach again? Does he go to ESPN? What does he do? Any ideas?
I'm sure he'll go to ESPN or CBS for at least the rest of the season. I would not be surprised if he popped up on one of CBS's NCAA tournament broadcasts at all. If it popped up on ESPN or in March at all, that certainly seems like something that would suit him right away at least. I could see him getting back into coaching. I don't know. He'll be one of those guys who may get another opportunity at a mid-major school where he's had success. He had success at New Mexico. They may want to have him back considering kind of what's going on there as well. They haven't had the same kind of success since he left. But, he may be one of those guys who goes back and tries to find a home at a major school, potentially work their way up back to a power conference or a lower-tier program in a power conference. But he's definitely going to have to take a couple steps back down the run because of just how bad it got.
Yeah, basically UCLA is still basketball mecca. I mean, it is. I mean, you can say what you want to about it. 11 national championships. It's still mecca. So anywhere he goes from here is going to be a downgrade.
Yeah.
my thought process, he probably should have never left New Mexico. He had a good thing going there. He was winning. Yeah. He was putting his team in the tournament. He was not under the pressure that he was under. But, it's kind of like, hey, I'm driving a Corvette, and you're telling me I can go take a Ferrari out, even though I may not be qualified to drive a Ferrari. What am I going to do? I'm going to take the Ferrari.
Right.
And then you're going to struggle with it, and then there you are.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, like I said, I wish him well. It's a tough situation, and we go from there. Okay, the Big 12. Kansas just dominate that thing? It's just theirs?
This one's tough for me because Kansas has the whole factor of playing at Allen Fieldhouse and everything that entails and the pretty much automatic wins it gives them in conference play. But in terms of Kansas themselves, I don't think they're the best team in the conference. I think that's Texas Tech, even though Texas Tech struggled with West Virginia last night. Kansas has not gotten good guard play. Really outside of Dietrich Lawson and Doka Azubuike, now that Gerald Vick has gone back to being who Gerald Vick was the past 3 years as opposed to who he was the first part of the season where he couldn't miss. Lawson and Azubuike are the only two guys who are really producing anything on a consistent level. And that's going to be something that we see Kansas really struggle with when they play against good teams, and especially when they play on the road. The thing that gets me is because they have such a home court advantage, I don't know if they'll ever lose enough games at home to be in real jeopardy of losing the conference this year. Because outside of Texas Tech, Kansas State's not who we thought they were going to be. Oklahoma, I was impressed with against Kansas, but I still don't think they're as good as the 23rd best team in the country like they're ranked right now. Iowa State's good, but has limitations. Texas has limitations. There's no other, third, fourth legitimate, really good team in that conference that could challenge them. So if Texas Tech stumbles, Kansas will run away with it again. I think Kansas will win. I think they'll be close. But they're just too good at home to lose it, despite them not being maybe the best or most talented team in that conference.
Okay, is Kansas? But are they? I've watched them play a couple times. Are they good enough? I don't see them as a serious threat to win the championship or make it even in the Final Four. I think they're there because they're Kansas, and a lot of name recognition there, and they've had a couple good years, a couple good runs. They got some talented players, but I really don't see them as a team that I think is going to even be in the Final Four.
They're going to get a high seed because their record's going to be inflated because of their home court, playing in the Big 12 and all that stuff. But they're going to be a great team to pick as on the wrong end of an upset in your bracket because they're not going to make a long run. Their guard play is going to get exposed. Their lack of scoring depth and scoring options is going to be exposed eventually by a good team on a neutral court. So they're not a team that's going to make a run.
All right, a couple more things here. I know I'm having a great conversation. I'm enjoying this entirely.
Absolutely.
We've gone through about half the season.
Mm-hmm.
Teams, we've talked about the Power 5 conferences. Who should we be talking about that we haven't talked about? Who's the surprise team that you've seen through your eyes that it's like, we're not talking about this team, and you better watch these guys because they're going to come and bite you? Who are those 2 or 3 teams in your eyes?
There's a lot of candidates. I think Marquette is legitimately good and is going to, I think, surprise some people in the in-state tournament. Texas Tech was kind of on that list for me, but the way they played against Duke, they sort of exploded on there as well. LSU and Mississippi State and the SEC are 2 teams to really watch for me. LSU has as much talent, pure talent, as anybody in that conference, and that includes Kentucky. The problem is LSU is young and have had a hard time really putting it together and coming through in late-game situations this year. If they are able to put it together, they're going to be a really dangerous team. Mississippi State has experience, has good guard play, has gotten some good play out of their bigs, and is why they're ranked in the top 20 in the country right now. They're a team to really watch that can go up against the Tennessees, can go up against the Kentuckys. The main question with them is consistency and can they shoot well enough from 3. So those would be the 2 that I think could really be a major surprise. in the SEC, and the only other one I really see that doesn't get talked about a ton, other than those two and then Marquette, is NC State in the ACC. And I'm right here in Raleigh. I've seen them play a couple times. They're a really good team that doesn't have the top-end guys would go about 10 deep with quality players, and they play a pressing up-tempo style. Kevin Keats is from the Rick Pitino coaching tree and plays that kind of similar style, and that's hard to go up against when you don't see it all the time. And so I think that kind of makes up for them not having that top-end guy. And because of that style and just the overall depth they have, they're going to be an interesting team to watch that's going to be able to, I think, beat some really good teams.
Okay. We haven't talked. What's Louisville's situation? I mean, they got a great young coach,
Mm-hmm.
Chris Mack from Xavier. What are they? Can they rebound quick enough to be relevant again quickly, or are they relevant now?
They're relevant now, and they're going to make game day tournament, which is a testament to how good of a job Chris Mack has done very quickly. They have one of the best recruiting classes in the country coming in next year, and they're going to be really relevant in the Final Four, top of the ACC conversation next year. But this year, they're just not talented enough to. What Mack has gotten out of them already has been outstanding, and the fact that they're pretty much a tournament lock at this point, again, barring some sort of collapse in conference play, has been outstanding. But there's just not the talent on that roster to make them anything more than, let's say, a max of a 6 or 7 seed this year.
Okay. All right. I'm going to backtrack just a second now because Chris Mack reminded me. Who's the next UCLA coach? I forgot to ask you that question when we were talking to Alford. This is Mecca. I mean, UCLA.
Yeah.
You can say what you want to about it, but it's the destination to go coach. And I mean, it's a program where if you can rebuild it and get it up there, you are a basketball guy. So, you
had talked
who's
about
coming out here?
Yeah, you had talked about the sort of NBA feel of UCLA and the Pac-12 in general. That seems to be where they're looking. Fred Hoiberg and Earl Watson, I've heard, are the two real big names they're going after, and both of whom are available right now, so they can't have contact with them right now. Of those two, I think Earl Watson's probably the favorite, just because I think did a decent job with the Suns. When he was with the Suns, they were terrible and didn't have any patience with him and didn't give him the players to really succeed. So I think he gets a bit of a pass for that. Players love him. He went to UCLA, obviously, and has strong ties with AAU programs in the state of California and the West Coast, so I think he knows that game and could recruit really well. I would be surprised if he didn't get the job. But, again, they're looking at Fred Hoiberg. And then Eric Musselman at Nevada is a name a lot of people really, really like as well, obviously, because what he's done at Nevada. And he also has some NBA experience from the early, mid-2000s. The only drawback or potential hesitation with Musselman that may give Watson the edge is the fact that he's built Nevada with transfers.
Right.
And there's some concern about UCLA, him trying to replicate it if he can have that same success at UCLA with just recruiting as opposed to building a roster and a team mostly based off of transfers.
And, I mean, this is me talking because I live out here, and, Hollywood is about 20 miles away from us, 15 miles, whatever. This place is tailor-made for Rick Pitino. This village. I mean, think about it. Rick Pitino is all show, and you talk about, and I thought he should have been coaching here before they hired Alford. Is he not a viable candidate? I mean, is he tarnished so bad now in college basketball that he'll never coach in college basketball again? Or would he be a real candidate? His name's been thrown around now. Maybe it's Jeff. But is he – I think he would fly out here. People would love him.
I personally – I agree with you. It's the fact that I think he would have success there and people would love him if it was 5-10 years ago. I personally don't think he'll coach in college basketball again. But if he does, it will be at a smaller mid-major school or really struggling Power 5 program that's looking for some sort of recognition and someone who can boost that program's profile, UCLA is too good of a job and is going to have too good of candidates to go after somebody who has that kind of baggage, I think.
I think Pitino and UCLA is the perfect college marriage. I think for being in Westwood, right on Sunset Boulevard, right here in Hollywood, I mean, I cannot think of a more fun thing than to have Rick Pitino coaching out here, kind of sticking up everybody's rear end. I'm back, and I'm back in a big way, and I still think he's a good basketball coach. He's won everywhere he's ever gone, and I personally think that's where UCLA should go, is just go Hollywood.
It would be incredibly interesting and incredibly fun. And it would probably lead to a good number of wins for UCLA, which they may not get this year. But I just don't see a way that happens.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and you're the genius, so I'm not. One last question for you. One last question for you, and then we'll wrap it up. How hard is it these days to be a coach in college basketball when you're pretty much looking at one-and-done players? How much stress and pressure, and what's the thought process in it? Because when I played, we were all over 4-year players. I mean, Knight relied on his seniors. I played in the championship game a lot of minutes because I was a senior. Not necessarily I wasn't the best player, but Knight knew he could rely on me. He knew what he was going to get out of me. Now you've got, Romeo Langford at Indiana again. There's every school has these. You got Zion Williamson, who's gone probably after this year for sure. Kansas has their share. How hard is it to change your mentality in coaching with one and done versus being able to develop players?
Well, you have to find a balance, because all the coaches who say they don't want one and done players because they want the 4-year guys and fill a program. The one and done guys are one and done guys. The one-and-done guys are one-and-done guys for a reason. It's because of the best players, and you win games by having the best players. So you have to go after those guys if you want your program to really have any sort of success. There is danger in doing what Duke has done and what Kentucky has done and pretty much going all in on only one-and-done players. Those schools have obviously been able to maintain some success by recruiting at a very high level consistently, but not every school can do that. You run into a problem when you kind of overload with one-and-done players and then maybe have a bad recruiting class or some players not paying out, and then you have a roster that doesn't have experience and then doesn't have talent, and you're kind of building again for 2 or 3 years. The best thing you can do is have some balance, get some one-and-done guys, but also recruit at a high level in that second tier of sort of the lower 5 stars, the higher 4-star guys, who are going to be really good players, but may not be those kind of lottery pick, first-round lock type of players who will end up staying for 2, 3, 4 years in hopes of becoming that guy, as opposed to somebody who's going to come in right away and automatically leave after 1 year. So finding that balance is what programs I think have to do, but it's one of the toughest things to do.
Yeah, I don't envy these guys, because you look at like Kentucky, it's almost like they've recruited too many one-and-done players, and they start losing them.
Yeah.
And guys say, I planned on only being here 1 year. I thought everybody from Kentucky gets drafted. I'm coming, but then all of a sudden I'm not playing, so I'm not going to get drafted. But I'm playing, so I'm going somewhere else. And I do agree there needs to be a balance. So you need to have the Risleys of the world, the me, who's not going to be an NBA. Well, no. I mean, call it what it is. It's fine. Not going to be an NBA player, but he's going to commit to the program for 4 years, stay around, and put a base on the program, and let coaches have that base. But then you bring the Isaiah Thomases in, who are here 1 or 2 years, and you win championships with them. And you know what? My ring looks just like Isaiah Thomas's, only his Isaiah Thomas on it. Mine says Risley. There's no difference there.
Just as pretty.
That's what it is. Yeah, just as pretty. Yeah, it's just exactly as pretty as his. So, anything else? Anything else we're missing? Anything else we need to know about college basketball this week? We'll do this again next week, I'm sure. Very much enjoyed it. Anything we didn't talk about today that we should be pointing out or mentioning?
I don't think so. I'm just excited we're in conference play. We got a lot of legitimate games on every night. So it's the calendar's turned, and it's a very good time to be a college basketball fan.
It really is, because football's winding down. We're down to the last couple of, one more college football game. Is there only one left now?
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't know if there's a bowl game tonight or something like that. I don't know. But, NFL starts the playoffs. My beloved Colts made the playoffs. Mm-hmm. So, unfortunately, your Carolina Panthers did not make the playoffs.
That's fine. So, I'm more mad that we got ourselves out of a bad draft pick last week than just take the loss and get a top 10 pick. But that's for another day. You get that, yeah. We'll have that conversation later. So, Brian, thank you very much. I appreciate the conversation. We'll do this again next week. And this is Survive in Advance on the Grilling Tooth Sports Network. And you can also find Brian at bustingbrackets.com, who's part of the Fansided Network. Bustingbrackets.com. Go ahead and sell yourself. I'll give you your 30 seconds to sell yourself. Where can we find you? Bustingbrackets.com. Find all my work there, or on Twitter at Rauf33, Brauf 33.
Great. Thank you very much. And we'll wrap the show up.
Always fun.
All right.